The diner was a relic, its neon sign flickering Maggie's place against the gray November sky in a small Ohio town. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and fried onions, and the jukebox hummed a faint Johnny Cash tune. At the counter, Clara, a waitress with silver-streaked hair and tired eyes, wiped down the same sticky spot for the third time that morning. She was 62, her hands calloused from decades of carrying trays, her smile practiced but warm. Across the room, in a corner booth by the window, a boy sat silent, his small hands folded tightly in his lap. He was maybe 8, with messy brown hair and eyes that seemed to carry the weight of a much older soul. Beside him, his father, a man in an expensive suit, typed furiously on his phone, his face sharp and distant. Clara noticed the boy's stillness, the way he stared at the salt shaker like it held some secret. Why does a child sit so quiet, like he's afraid to breathe? Clara had seen them before every Saturday. Same booth, same order, pancakes for the boy, black coffee for the dad. The man, who she'd heard someone call Mr. Grayson, never looked up from his phone. The boy, whose name she didn't know, never spoke. Not a word, not a sound. She tried smiling at him once, offering a little wave, but he'd only ducked his head, his cheeks flushing. Today, though, something felt different. The diner was quieter. The usual truckers and locals thinned out by the early snow dusting the streets. Clara watched the boy trace a finger along the edge of his placemat, his lips moving slightly, like he was whispering to himself. She felt a tug in her chest, the kind that comes from years of watching people carry their hurts. She approached the booth, her sneakers squeaking on the linoleum. "Morning, folks," she said, her voice soft but clear. "Pancakes and coffee, same as always?" Mr. Grayson nodded without looking up, his fingers still tapping his phone. The boy's eyes flicked to her, then away, quick as a sparrow. Clara hesitated, then set a small paper napkin in front of him, one she doodled a smiley face on during a slow shift. "Thought you might like this," she said gently. "You can draw on it if you want." The boy froze, his fingers hovering over the napkin. His father didn't notice. Clara walked away, her heart pounding a little. Why would a stranger care when even family had stopped checking in? The diner stayed quiet that morning, the snow keeping folks home. Clara kept an eye on the boy as she refilled coffee pots and swept crumbs from empty tables. He'd picked up the napkin, his small fingers tracing the smiley face. He didn't draw, but he held it like it was something precious. When they left, he tucked it into his pocket, his eyes meeting hers for a split second. There was something there, gratitude, maybe, or curiosity. Clara didn't know why it mattered so much, but it did. She went home that night to her small apartment above the thrift store, where the radiator hissed and her cat, Muffin, curled up on the couch. She thought about the boy, wondering what kept him so silent, what made his father so cold. The next Saturday, they were back. Same booth, same order. But this time, Clara noticed the boy had brought the napkin back, its edges worn from being handled. He set it on the table, smoothing it flat, the smiley face faded but still there. Clara's heart lifted. She grabbed a fresh napkin and, on a whim, drew a little dog with floppy ears. When she brought their order, she slid it next to his plate. "This one's for you," she whispered, winking. His eyes widened, and for the first time, she saw a tiny smile flicker across his face. Mr. Grayson, engrossed in a call, didn't see. Clara walked away, her chest warm. She didn't know why she kept trying, but something about that boy's silence called to her, like a song she couldn't quite hear. Over the weeks, it became a ritual. Clara would leave a new napkin with a drawing a cat, a tree, a strand. The boy would take it, his fingers careful, his eyes brightening just a little more each time. She started adding words to the drawings, simple ones like hi or smile. One day, she wrote, "What's your name?" and left a pencil beside it. When she came back to clear their plates, the boy had written in shaky letters, "Eli." Clara's throat tightened. She looked at him, and he met her gaze, his lips parting like he wanted to say something but couldn't. "You ever feel like kindness finds you when you need it most?" Eli started coming to the diner more often, sometimes without his father. Clara learned he lived a few blocks away in a big house that looked more like a museum than a home. She'd see him walking past the diner's windows, his coat too thin for the Ohio winter, his head down. One snowy afternoon, when the diner was nearly empty, Eli slipped inside and sat at the counter. Clara slid a hot chocolate his way, the whipped cream wobbling on top. "On the house," she said, leaning against the counter. "You okay, Eli?" He stared at the mug, his fingers wrapping around it. Then, so quiet she almost missed it, he whispered, "Thank you." His voice was small, like a bird testing its wings. Clara froze, her eyes stinging. It was the first time she'd heard him speak. From then on, Eli talked a little more each visit, just a word or two at first. Cold. Nice. Dog. But it was enough to make Clara's heart ache with hope. She learned bits about him. His mom had passed away when he was 4. His dad was a businessman who traveled constantly, and Eli spent most of his time with a nanny who barely spoke to him. Clara started saving things for him, a shiny pebble she found on her walk, a bookmark from the thrift store, a story about her cat. Each time, Eli's eyes would light up, and he'd say a little more. One day, he asked, "Why are you so nice to me?" Clara paused, wiping her hands on her apron. "Because you deserve it, Eli," she said. "And because I know what it's like to feel alone." Eli looked at her, his eyes searching, and she wondered, when was the last time someone saw him, really saw him? Winter deepened, the snow piling high outside Maggie's place. Eli started spending afternoons at the diner, doing homework at the counter while Clara worked. She'd quiz him on spelling words, cheer when he got them right, and slip him extra cookies. The other regulars noticed an old veteran named Tom would tell Eli stories about his dog, and Mrs. Larson, who ran the church bake sale, started bringing him puzzles. The diner became a little warmer, a little brighter, because of one silent boy who was learning to speak. But Clara worried about his father. Mr. Grayson still came on Saturdays, still buried in his phone, never noticing the change in Eli. She wondered what kind of man could miss his own son's light coming back. One Saturday in February, the diner was packed, the air thick with the smell of bacon and chatter. Eli sat at the counter, drawing on a napkin Clara had given him a picture of a house with a big sun above it. Clara was rushing between tables when she heard it, a small, clear voice saying, "Clara, look!" She turned, and there was Eli, holding up his drawing, his face bright with pride. "It's our house," he said, louder now, "but with a sun, 'cause it's happy." The diner went quiet, every head turning, Clara's eyes filled with tears. She knelt beside him, her voice shaky. "It's beautiful, Eli, just beautiful." The regulars clapped, some wiping their eyes, and for a moment, the diner felt like a family. Mr. Grayson arrived late that day, his suit pristine despite the slush outside. He stopped short when he saw Eli at the counter, surrounded by smiling faces. "What's going on?" he demanded, his voice sharp. Clara stood, her hands trembling but her voice steady. "Your son spoke, Mr. Grayson. He's been speaking for weeks now. He's got a voice, and it's a good one. Mr. Grayson's face tightened, his eyes flicking to Eli, who was clutching his napkin drawing. "He doesn't talk," he said, almost to himself. "He hasn't since—" His voice trailed off, and Clara saw something crack in his expression, grief, maybe, or guilt. Could this moment, this one, act to right everything they believed about life and loss? Mr. Grayson sat beside Eli, his phone forgotten on the counter. "Eli," he said softly, "you drew this?" Eli nodded, his eyes nervous but steady. "It's for Clara," he said, his voice small but clear. "She's my friend, Mr. Grayson's hands shook as he took the napkin, his eyes tracing the wobbly lines of the house, the bright yellow sun. He looked at Clara, then back at Eli, and for the first time, Clara saw tears in his eyes. "I didn't know," he whispered. "I didn't know you could." He stopped, his voice breaking. Clara stepped back, giving them space, her own tears falling as she busied herself with the coffee pot. The diner buzzed with quiet emotion as father and son talked, their voices low but growing stronger. Mr. Grayson asked Eli about his drawings, his school, his favorite things. Eli answered, hesitant at first, then with a rush of words, like a dam breaking. Clara watched from behind the counter, her heart full. Later, as they left, Mr. Grayson approached her, his face softer than she'd ever seen it. "You did this," he said, his voice thick. "You brought him back." Clara shook her head, wiping her eyes. "No, sir, he was always there. He just needed someone to listen." Grayson reached into his coat and pulled out an envelope, pressing it into her hand. "Please," he said, "for everything." Clara didn't open it until they were gone. Inside was a check for 50, more money than she'd ever seen. A note read, "For Eli's friend who gave him his voice." She sank onto a stool, her hands shaking, tears streaming down her face. The money could change her life, pay off her debts, fix her car, maybe even let her rest. But it wasn't the money that made her cry. It was the thought of Eli, his small voice ringing out, his smile lighting up the diner. She thought of all the years she'd felt invisible, pouring coffee for strangers, and how one small act doodling on a napkin had changed everything. What if your smallest kindness became someone else's reason to keep going? That night, Clara sat on her porch swing, the snow falling softly around her. She thought about Eli, about the diner, about the way a single moment could ripple out and touch so many lives. She'd keep working at Maggie's place, keep drawing napkins for Eli, keep listening to the quiet ones who came through her door. Because that's what kindness does, it sees the unseen, hears the silent, and builds a home where none existed before. Has kindness ever changed your life? Tell us in the comments. Your story might inspire our next video. This story is a work of fiction or dramatized for entertainment purposes. While it may be inspired by real human emotions and events, all characters, names, and situations are either entirely fictional or modified for storytelling. This content fully complies with YouTube's community guidelines and is intended to inspire, not mislead.